All right, so for this class, you're going to learn to use watercolors. You're going to need a few things, obviously. The kit that we got you. You're going to need a couple of brushes. I would pick these two out of the brush. They're the kind of rounded tips here that you'll see. One smaller, one bigger. Not the really small brush. You don't need the really tiny brushes. You'll need your palette. And you'll need, these are things I did not give you, a piece of paper towel or an actual towel if you want. I'm keeping mine off to the side. It doesn't fit on screen, unfortunately. And you're going to need a glass of water because this is watercolor. And you're going to be working with water for watercoloring. And what I'm going to do today is just, you're going to make two color wheels. The first one you'll notice that I made just by tracing this circle or using the pan. So we're going to create a second one here. Oh, it doesn't fit. Oh no. Whatever. It's fine. And then what you're going to do is divide it into 12s. Think of a clock. 12, 6, 3, 9, 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 11. And there you go. Now you've got two color wheels ready to go. The difference is that we're going to be working in two different mediums or two different types of painting techniques for watercolors. One is a dry brush technique, which I'm going to start by showing you now. You're always going to need a little bit of water. Actually, I picked the wrong brush. Use the smaller brush if you want. You should. Use the smaller brush. And you're going to get it wet. You might notice that your brushes come out of the bag stiff, which means they have a lot of starch in them, so you're going to need to get them wet and break them loose anyway. But what you don't want to do is have an overly wet brush. You just need to pull the water off of that. If it's too wet, you're going to get your colors all gooey. And you're going to start by working with the lightest color first. So I would suggest yellow. I'm going to pick this yellow. And I'm going to get it liquidy. And I'm going to work with what's called a dry brush technique or a dryer technique. And so I'm going to paint yellow. And it's going to be pretty solid. And you'll notice that it goes on pretty thick if you do it right. If it's too wet, it won't. You'll also see that your pencil line still shows. Now to change colors, you simply dunk your brush into the water, pull some of it off, and if it's still got a lot of color in it, you can use your paper towel and you see whether or not there's any color left. It should be damp enough to keep using. You're going to work towards the yellow-orange, which you should recognize from you're creating your original. And you're just going to pull, you're going to get this cake a little bit wet. And then you're going to paint. And again, what's considered a much more of a dry brush technique so that it's a little bit thicker. And you're going to make very specific edges. I'm going very fast, but I want you to practice working in a very specific technique. So this is again with a drier brush. That orange isn't so great. You'll move on, wash it off, dry it off a little bit, clean it off a little bit. Now you're going to work to straight orange, which would be this one probably. Now remember, yellow is your primary color. This orange will be your, see how nice that is? That's great. And you're going to create very specific edges on this first color wheel. Right? Now, if this is our primary color, this is our secondary color, you know this to be a tertiary color. This is, you guessed it, yellow-orange. And I want you to create this color wheel all the way across, all the way around. So obviously you'll go from yellow-orange, or from orange to red-orange to red, etc., etc., etc. And you should know what that means. Now, the second technique is a wet technique. And so again, these brushes come out a little bit stiff because they come starched to hold their shape. You're going to have to get it wet. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take this bigger brush and you're going to paint just water onto your paper. Don't get it overly wet, but you want your paper to be wet. Now it's not going to last. The paper's going to absorb it all the way around. So it's okay to get it damp first, but you're going to keep applying clean water as you go to the second color wheel. And what you're going to notice is that when we go back to paint with our yellow, that it's going to be much waterier. I don't know what that means, but it's not going to be as opaque or as have as much chroma, and that's part of the technique of watercolors, to use this wet brush or this wet paper technique. Wet on wet technique is what it's called. And what I want you to do with this is make sure you have a wet palette or wet paper when you apply your yellow-orange. And I want not only you to have this pool around, but I also want you to try to blend those two colors together a little bit so that we get a much more blended version of a color wheel here. So I'm going to be moving on to my actual orange and apply it. Oops, there's not enough water. So you notice that my paper dried out. So I'm going to add more water, and look what happens. And that's what I want. I want you to practice not only with this like wet on wet technique, but I also want you to try to blend the two colors together so that they kind of merge together a little bit better. So you'll have to clean off your brush. You'll have to wet down this paper. Go to your different brush, and when you go to get your red-orange here, it'll blend together much better. And look at that. That looks really cool. And what you're going to notice is the pigment washes around in an interesting way, and I want you to practice with that. If it doesn't blend together very well, you can add a little more water. Just try to get it to blend a little bit together. If you overdo it, you can take your paper towel and dab it to blot it up a little bit if you want. So the trick here is then to make two separate color wheels. One that is a very dry brush technique, and the other one that is a wet on wet technique. And when you're finished, clean out your brushes with water. Pretty easy. You can switch out your water, and you can even clean your palette. Try to keep these things clean. If you need to mix brushes, that's what this is for. Or mix colors, that's what this is for. You shouldn't need to mix colors. There should be plenty of tertiary colors in this set for you to create a whole color wheel. You should not have to create your own tertiary colors. Let's see what you come up with, and then post it to Schoology when you are finished. So when you're finished, you should have something slightly close to this. I noticed that a couple of the colors, especially the green-yellow, is not great. Well, the green-yellow is actually pretty good, but you're going to have to find this is this color, and this is this color, and I think they should be swapped. So if you notice that this has a lot more blue in it for a blue-green, and this is just pretty much straight-up green. So use this guy for here, use this guy for here. But you'll notice that how specific each one of these edges are, and how blended together these edges are. And I did this really quick. I hope you do a better job.